All right. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Talkin' Ball Live with Pat Leonard, 9 p.m. Eastern Time, Monday, August 19th. It's Giants Jets week, everybody. Malik Neighbors, Sauce Gardner. Let's go. Let's see the one-on-ones in practice on Wednesday. Let's see the Giants and Jets settle out their rosters. And let's see, at least through the practice week, if not in the game, the Giants starters on both sides of the ball. Hopefully, A, stay healthy, and B, the roster round out. We'll talk about some moves that came down on the roster. We'll talk about clearing cap space with Andrew Thomas. I first wanted to open up, though, discussing what I gleaned from the game in Houston, sitting there in the press box at NRG Stadium, about what the Giants' offensive identity is going to be here in 2024 with Brian Daboll as play caller and Daniel Jones fighting for his Giants' life, so to speak, as the franchise quarterback. I think what we saw was the emphasis that I spoke to players about throughout training camp, which was trying to push the ball downfield, trying to create those deep shots with Malik Neighbors in the receiving core. That also includes Biletnikoff Award winner Jalen Hyatt, Wan'Dale Robinson, and of course, the man who unlocked it all, Darius Slayton, who felt underappreciated in the spring and reinforces in the second preseason game why he and Daniel Jones make such a good pair. But it's all well and good to want to push the ball down the field. We all know every offense comes out trying to push the ball down the field and creating explosive plays, but that's not always going to happen, and you have to find a way to get there sometimes as well. Or if that's going to be the foundation of your offense, you have to complement it to keep defenses honest. And I think one thing we've seen through practices, but also now in the games, Daniel Bellinger, a tight end, lining up at fullback, an ample amount of really, I guess you could call it 21 personnel, really with two running backs and one tight end on the field, or flip-flopping it and having the two inline tight ends and having it being 12 personnel with one running back and two tight ends. I think it's very clear that the Giants' running game and even a lot of their pass protection concepts compared to some of the seasons past is going to involve a lot of two tight ends on the field, either to create an extra blocker in the hole for their running backs to try to spring Devin Singletary a little bit or give a guy like Eric Gray room to run on the second level. And then also with Daniel Jones in the passing game, you can see that when they line up that tight end in the backfield, and of course, Jacob Johnson now signed to compete in that role as well, there's a clear emphasis on if we're going to push the ball deep, it's not just going to be the offensive line. It's not just going to be the standard inline tight end. We're going to find a way to get bigger bodies in front of Daniel Jones in the backfield to create that extra half second that allows him to push the ball down the field because they feel like they have those guys making plays out there. There's going to be plenty of 11 personnel as well, running back, tight end, and three wide receivers, because the Giants, obviously their roster calls for that, given the talent they have at wide receiver. And let's be honest, Daboll said as much, that the emphasis in this game was trying to take those shots to give Daniel Jones a feel of a rush, to see what they could do, generate some confidence in that regard. But I think it'll be an interesting blend of that and then also the 2022 offense that helped the Giants to the playoffs, even though Brian Daboll's preference is to push the ball down the field. I think we're going to see a lot of Daniel Jones using his legs. And I believe we're going to see a lot of underneath catch and run. You know, we did not see some of the patented plays that Daboll likes to run with Neighbors and Wan'Dale Robinson underneath in that Texans game. But I think a running play is all well and good, and you want to be able to run the ball as the Giants. But I think some of their quote unquote runs are going to be plays where they're just trying to get Neighbors or Wan'Dale Robinson 2 or 3 yards upfield over the line of scrimmage in space and get them the ball running horizontally and turning upfield. You almost want to think of it as the way that they tried to use Evan Engram a lot of the time. Of course, Engram was much better used vertically than horizontally, but they would often try to get Evan Engram going across the field because he had that speed, try to get a catch and run, maybe 5 yards and turn. So that's what it's going to look like with Neighbors and Wan'Dale Robinson. Shallow crosses, rub routes, things of that nature. Guys who are really good once the ball is in their hands. And I've told a lot of people this, but the way that Wan'Dale Robinson has been that player for the Giants, and he can make those plays, but also tends to make the catch and get tackled. more often than not. Neighbors in practice and even in joint practices against the Lions has shown an ability to get 2 or 3 steps ahead of a guy on some of those routes. So when he catches it, he is in the open field. And we all were around watching Odell Beckham Jr. when we had an LSU star wide receiver here in New York who was adept at catching the ball. And if there was even a sliver of a chance of making it into a big play or a long touchdown, he was out, right? So I think that the goal of this offense is, I think there's going to be a lot more shorter than what we saw in the Texans game, even though their goal is to hit those explosives. I think we're going to see a blend of heavy personnel with those 2 tight ends, with one functioning as a fullback, or it could be the fullback Jacob Johnson himself, in order to generate a run game and then go play action deep pass off of that. But definitely looking to get the ball into the hands of their playmakers. And so I think you're going to see a lot underneath. I think you're going to see Jones using his legs. I think you're going to see the speed of Neighbors and Wan'Dale Robinson, just across the line of scrimmage on some of those rub routes in order to get the defense's eyes going, sending players in motion. You saw a jet sweep to Malik Neighbors as well. Daboll is definitely going to try to pull out the stops to get the defense's eyes going left to right. And then once he can do that, he's going to use that extra body in for pass protection to take a shot downfield, because what they've seen is that they do feel in one-on-one, they have at least 3 guys on the roster who can win. So I want to tell you guys about our sponsors. We'll get to some of the transactions and the chat. I see D Kit is already starting us off with a $10 super chat. D Kit is the man. I will throw that up on the screen as I do these ad reads quickly, and we get right into the live Q&A portion of our Talkin' Ball Live. We got the Woodford Reserve in the house. I hope you guys have your glasses, have your drinks, or whatever it takes for you to relax and talk some Giants and NFL football. But I will get to all the conversations, all the questions I see in the queue, G-Men, Joel, Manzilla. So we will get to all of that. Talking Ball with Pat Leonard is brought to you by the Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, a natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants and heart-healthy compounds. You can easily pour this natural liquid supplement into any of your favorite drinks. I put mine in my coffee every morning and immediately feel the difference. I personally have felt a post-workout-like energy boost with Boom. Chaga also has the ability to lower cholesterol, reduce inflammation, and improve immune and heart health with its beta-glucans and antioxidants. Go to boomchaga.com today to place your first order. And if you use the discount code TalkinBall25 or use the QR code on your screen, you will get 25% off your first subscribe and save order. Right now, that means a month's supply costs you only $30. Start feeling the difference today. Go to boomchaga.com. Go to subscribe and save, type in TalkinBall25, get the discount, and then you can cancel it out. You don't have to stay subscribed. Also brought to you by Estate 98 Coffee, an all-natural specialty coffee with no sugar that is convenient for on-the-go professionals and parents. It takes me less than 10 seconds to make a delicious Estate 98 iced coffee, and only a minute more, actually, to make a hot coffee or latte from this all-natural concentrate. If you listen to my interview with Allen Robinson, Allen Robinson told me during that interview that he started drinking coffee when he was 8 years old, and I am excited to bring him a bottle of Estate 98 to try himself. Go to estate98.com/talkinball to get a special buy one, get one free deal. That's estate98.com/talkinball to get a special buy one, get one free deal. And finally, last but not least, BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. From the preseason NFL to college kicking off, BetOnline has every stat, matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. Think you know your stuff? Get in on our winner-take-all $300,000 NFL Survivor pool for the upcoming season. When the game is over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slot games. Head to the website today and use the promo code BELIEVE and get in on the action. BetOnline, the game starts here. And we start with D-Kit, $10, checking in, supporting the chat, as always, Talking Ball Live. D-Kit says, please rephrase this to the type of offense the Giants hope they can play, because all it really is a hope and a prayer. There will be no consistent play from Daniel Jones. D-Kit, I hear where your mind's at. I hear where your heart's at and your head's at, especially coming out of that preseason opener for Jones, right? His first return since the torn ACL. in November. Though, as I wrote for the New York Daily News Tuesday edition, it's an interesting situation for the Giants because you come out of that game, there's some panic in Giants land, understandably so, over Jones's mistakes. They look like the same old mistakes. That said, it's also a sobering, inconvenient, maybe reality, but you have to admit he's their best quarterback, and he's been their best quarterback by far, at least from what we've seen so far. We know Tommy DeVito's a third stringer, right? Good story, but a third stringer. No points in the second half against the Houston Texans with the backups, and a sack fumble. And then Drew Lock injured right now, but what you saw in the Detroit game, I know he's had a little bit limited sample size in games so far, so obviously he could turn it around, quote unquote. But you have to just say what you've seen on the field, which is nothing overwhelming. Even on Jones's rough days or worst days, it wasn't like Drew Lock was then challenging for the job. You saw some good passes down the field, but we haven't seen enough to, let's say, reinforce the belief that we had coming out of the spring, which is that this could end up being a quarterback competition. It is not that. And so you're right, D-Kit. It is about what they hope. But the reason I said, let's talk about what the identity is that's forming is because if you remember going into the game, Daniel Jones made an interesting and a smart comment about where the Giants offense stood. He said that they were still trying to figure out what they were going to major in. And I believe what his point was there was we know we have some good weapons and we know that we have some talent here, but we're still figuring out how we're going to put it together in our game plans on game day to maximize that talent and to fit it into game plans that can produce victories, right? And so this again goes back to how difficult it can be to kind of change things on the fly, whether it's play calling, whether it's the coaching staff, a lot of different parts moving, right? New offensive line coach in the offense, for example, new tight ends coach, Daboll calling plays, Kafka removed from that process, Daboll kind of running the full ship. So it's a lot of learn as they go, as well as some consistency from what has come from years past. But I definitely think, D-Kit, that what we saw was, you're right, their intentions, right? Their intentions on offense. But I think a point I wanted to hammer home discussing this was very clearly they are not only did they, they went and signed some of these linemen in free agency, things like that to try to upgrade the line. But also it looks to me like the way Daboll is scheming the running game and the backfield with those tight ends, fullbacks, and having a lot of two tight ends on the field, whether it's using them as a running back in 21 personnel or as a tight end in 12, definitely looks to me like that is an emphasis to try to unlock those deep shots and also help the running game when they are trying to create those holes. All right, let's see. We got G-Men says, good evening, Pat. Reports state, yes, Field Yates from ESPN said that the Giants have converted $4.175 million of left tackle Andrew Thomas's base salary into a signing bonus, creating $3.34 million in 2024 cap space with around $18 million to work with. Yeah, the part about converting the salary, the base salary, into a signing bonus, that is true. The around $18 million salary cap, I'm assuming that has to do with once they whittle down to the 53, because at the moment, the public salary cap report, the Giants are reflected as only having $9 million in salary cap space. But, Field Yates is very good at this. He's on top of it. So I'm sure that what he's saying, that they're going to end up with over 18 or around 18 million to work with, is accurate. I mean, I believe that, but that is definitely not the number that is reflected in the NFLPA records at the moment, which is what the official records are. Obviously, they do change daily, though. But the bottom line is, yes, they did create some cap space here. Interesting timing. This was something that if they were going to do it, you were expecting it was going to happen earlier than this. So interesting timing. So G-Men follows that up by saying they have that money to work with this season. Could a veteran free agent signing be on the way for a veteran corner, or a potential trade late in training camp? Doesn't seem like they had to restructure Thomas at the moment. G-Men, I do think, I'm glad you brought this up right away. I do believe my personal opinion, from talking to people around the league, is that The trade market right now makes more sense for adding a player who's going to require you to create cap space than the veteran free agent market at the moment. So, I would be looking at trades. Joe Shane, we know, he acquired Isaiah Simmons last year. We saw him, dump Jordan Phillips this year to the Cowboys. He definitely works the phones at this time of year. One encouraging thing, we're actually talking to Brandon Brown, the assistant GM, tomorrow on the record at a press conference. So that will be Tuesday, August 20th. So that's good timing for that conversation. I don't know how much he'll actually yield and reveal there. I would say, G-Men, I would put on your board right now, interior defensive line, also inside linebacker right now. I'm concerned about. We know they've had a lot of injuries there. Matt Adams went down. Micah McFadden went down. Deontay Johnson's already down. McFadden is somebody I'm curious to see what Brian Daboll gives us in terms of an update when we come back to these practices, because he had that hip injury. It looked like he was kind of grabbing at the groin area there when he was carted off. And, that's a player who, if he's out for a couple weeks, let's say, or the projection is he'll be out a little while and it's inching towards that week 1 time frame, that could be a position where the Giants suddenly need to go find somebody. Now, Deontay Johnson, like I said, I've liked that young player, but how is his ankle going to hold up? I mean, he's been in a boot. Now, week 1 is still just under 3 weeks away. So if Micah McFadden wasn't ready for week 1, maybe Deontay Johnson gets better in time for that, right? That could also be a possibility. But I would put corner on the board. I would put linebacker on the board. Interesting to me. I mean, running back looks like a concern to me. I know they have Singletary, Eric Gray, but that looks like a concern. They definitely have a lot of needs on this roster. And just poking around a little bit, I think they have, I think the trade market is what I'm watching right now. Especially when it comes to, we're going to acquire a player who's going to play for us, who's going to start for us, and we're going to have to pay a little bit more. So we're creating this space. Also, remember, the Giants have had a lot of injuries. They've been, stashing a guy here on IR, adding another guy, signing this player here, those types of things. So those incremental costs sometimes add up. So you also need the space to operate through the season, though the timing of this definitely is running right up until trade, waiver wire, cut down day, all of that. I view this as an interesting kind of precursor to potential trade activity at the cut down day deadline. Let's see. Our man D with another $10. Thank you so much. So FYI, everybody, if you have a question, I will get to it. But D Kid is setting the standard here. If you pay for a super chat or a super sticker, you will have your question or comment addressed and answered immediately. So it's a fun way to live in the chat, support the chat. Don't feel obligated to do it, but I really appreciate it when you do. If you're not going to purchase a super chat or super sticker, I'll still get to your question. Just ask that you hit that like button while we are live. Hitting those like buttons while we're live tells Giants fans, NFL fans who don't know what we're doing here yet to jump on board, and that live kind of interaction helps, tells the algorithm, let's go. This is popular. It's cooking, and we are. So thank you for all of that. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, a day later on Tuesday morning or later here Monday night, thank you for listening. Hopefully you can join us on Talkin' Ball Live on the YouTube channel at PL on NFL next time. Mondays and Thursdays, 9 p.m. typically. Though definitely feeling excited about this week. Who knows if Wednesday is crazy enough? Maybe we'll do a bonus episode on Wednesday after the Giants-Jets joint practice. Want to talk a little bit about that as well tonight. Kind of preview what we're going to see out there in Florham Park. And remember, Talkin' Ball Live post games after every Giants home and away game. We do Talkin' Ball Live from the stadium, bring you the latest from the locker room, from inside the Giants locker room, from talking to Brian Daboll, and from everything in between that we see in person on the field. All right. D Kid says, realistically, how many practice days are left to even attempt to get this right? If it isn't good now after the entire preseason, is it magically getting better week 1? I don't think so. I think, D, it's definitely something where this looks like the time. I hear what you're saying. this team looks like it's trying to find its way. And it looks like a team that maybe will find its way closer to. Now, this happens with a lot of NFL teams. In fact, a lot of coaches will tell you, like, it's hard to really figure out who your team is until week 4 or 5 or whatever. But the bottom line is they don't really have a lot of time here to figure that out. They need to win games early for sure. So that's the concern, right? But that tends to happen with a lot of teams as they sort themselves out, but they definitely just have a different kind of timeline of expectations and pressure going into this one. How many practice days left, you ask? So as we sit here on the 19th, they have the 20th, the 21st, and the 22nd. And then I believe they have maybe 3 the next week with cut downs and everything, 3 or 4. So let's say let's call that 7. And then they have, week 1. So we're talking 11 practices or so. That's an unofficial count, but that's a good ballpark there prior to week 1. Yeah, I think, and the injuries is something to watch as well. I mean, definitely, I think the priority right now, the Giants typically do not play, like Daboll has not played his starters in either of the final preseason games the last 2 years. So, that would be his norm. Now, the Giants have operated a lot differently this year, especially from how they've prepared, how they've practiced in training camp. So it's possible that they could change it up for this as well, coming out of that Houston game and operating differently. That's possible, giving the starters a quarter because they feel like they still need to see more, that type of thing. I definitely think, though, especially considering how banged up their roster is, they will err on the side of caution, at least with their top guys. So that would be, Andrew Thomas, Dexter Lawrence, Bobby Okereke, let's see, Neighbors, right? Those kind of things. I would think, especially just because they're losing guys are dropping like flies. But I'm interested to see that as well, because like I said, they have changed up their operation a lot from the last couple of years. D Kit says QB on the way. So D Kit thinks they're trading for a quarterback. Oh boy. I mean, that would reflect bad management to be trading for a quarterback now. Joel says, curious to see what Joe has up his sleeve with creating extra cap space. Yeah, I think you can see too, Joel, that the Giants, it's not for lack of trying right now to try to kind of create reinforcements in their roster. They really have been aggressive at signing guys, but they've also needed to, right? They've just had a lot of injuries. By the way, I forgot to go over them, but just so you guys know, transactions that came down today, I'm sure some of you saw them already, but the Giants waived defensive lineman Ryder Anderson injured, so he hurt his hamstring in Houston. That's a bummer. I mean, I really like Ryder a lot. Really good guy, good young player. And if you remember, like Shane Bowen, when he came in here, Ryder Anderson was a name that he kind of threw up there high on the list and said, I want to see what this guy has. They had him working as the primary defensive tackle next to Dexter Lawrence for several days early in training camp. And then he has been continually in that rotation, although Elijah Chapman obviously has kind of charged up the depth chart. But, Ryder was having a good camp. They were putting a lot of stock into his play and liking what he was doing. So, I feel bad for him, and I don't like seeing that. And then they also placed offensive tackle Yadni Kajust on injured reserve. So I was standing there outside the locker room in Houston. He got carted back to the locker room after Saturday's game. And against the Texans, he did limp then into the locker room. He will not count against the Giants' 90-man roster limit by getting placed on that IR slot. And then they signed 2 rookie free agents after creating that room. They signed former Minnesota defensive tackle Kyler Baugh and former South Alabama linebacker Trey Kaiser. So both guys who have to just come in and play at positions where the Giants are very thin due to injury. And man, do they have they're starting to get a lot of Minnesota players on this team with John Michael Schmitz, Tyler Nubin, now Kyler Baugh. I mean, a lot of Golden Gophers here in New York. They also worked out a corner, former Lions and Panthers corner AJ Parker, though they did not sign him. And then, of course, we already went over the cap space clearing with Andrew Thomas. So those were the transactions that we saw come down here on August 19th. Manzilla says, how short is Daniel Jones' leash going to be this year? Manzilla, that's an interesting question because it would seem obvious that if he looks like same old Daniel Jones and he's costing you games, then there's no reason to keep playing him, except if he falls on his face early and they're losing. If you take him out and you lose out, everybody loses jobs. Like if it gets that bad that quickly, that early. So they're not going to want Daniel Jones to go down with a season-ending injury where they're going to have to owe him that injury guarantee. But I don't think personally they're in a place where they can bench him and put in another quarterback and they're going to win it all. So, that's an interesting conversation, right? Like from the general manager seat, from Joe Shane's seat. Well, obviously Brian Daboll would be usually in those situations, the coach is the one who's saying, whoa. Like, yeah, maybe we want to pull the plug here, but if we do, and we lose our next 2 games by 45 combined points, I'm not even going to be here in November, right? And then from a GM standpoint, it also depends on ownership, GM, that relationship. How much patience does the GM feel that he has from ownership? What kind of rope does he have for the long term? How much do they see this as a foundation that has been laid and just things outside of his control? Or do they tie him to the quarterback because he paid him on that extension? And does he take the blame and the responsibility for that? So that's what goes into those decisions, Manzilla. So it's very complicated. There's different people involved in it whose jobs end up being on the line. But I think, frankly, his leash is, from my vantage point, it's actually a little bit longer than we may have thought a little while ago, like a couple months ago, because I just don't think they have anybody behind him who's going to win them games right now. D-Kit doubles down, says we cannot play this season with Jones at quarterback. It is a prescription for disaster. There is a book out on him and how he plays. Nothing Daboll or anyone can do to change him. He is not a good quarterback. So I also think, D-Kit, we talked about this, but so it's Daboll's job as well so in 2022, of course, the defense had a lot to do with the team they were, but one thing Daboll did well on offense was that he complemented the defense and they created game plans for every week. And he didn't want to run the ball all the time and be a run heavy offense where the quarterback was basically running as much, if not more than what he threw, but he felt like that's what they had to do to win. Now, that was smart and savvy. It's also not a sustainable way to become a modern, explosive, winning offense and team. And so I do think that coming out of that, if what you saw early last year, I know Kafka was calling plays, but it's still Daboll's offense. A lot of the plays running Daniel Jones and some of the gadget plays that were working in 2022, like you said that the book is out on Jones. I think also the book is out on certain favorite plays that Daboll used in 2022 that worked. So he needs to reinvent the wheel a little bit when it comes to utilizing Daniel and this offense. So it can't just, yes, there is a book on ways to fluster Daniel or to fluster certain quarterbacks. That is for sure. But there are also ways I think that Brian Daboll needs to look at how to continue to try to help him. It can't be the same ways, Joe Winograd, thank you, Joe. Joe checks in with a $10 super chat. He says, evening, Pat. Caught Authentic's live stream earlier this afternoon. Really looking forward to you guys doing a collab. Thanks for keeping it real with us. You got it, Joe. Authentic is great. He's the man. Everybody should check out Authentic's live streams anytime he does them. He's phenomenal. A huge supporter of our channel. Yeah, Authentic and I talked. We're going to collaborate. We're going to connect again. I have to look into exactly what day, what time. It could end up being this Thursday. It also could end up being next Monday. So we'll see what works for Authentic, what works for me. And we will bring the heat. We will bring the fire. We will bring the Giants conversation. I'm really looking forward to that. Authentic is great, no doubt. And Joe, thank you so much for supporting the channel as always. All right. Barb wants to know where the money is going that was just created. Yeah, good question. Was a lot of choices, right, Barb? So we talked, corner, linebacker, D tackle, running back. D Kit thinks it needs to be Ryan Tannehill and a quarterback and a cornerback. Whoa, Ryan Tannehill. Isn't it funny too that you're using the name Ryan Tannehill and that was Daniel Jones' comp coming out of college? Let's see. Michael thinks they will roll with Daniel Jones and use the money on a second corner. D Kid says any hope I had with Jones was quashed on Saturday. It was a preseason game, but having watched the game again, it's clear he's done. I also think if you watched it, like I watched the all 22 footage and I was there in person. So I think I said this to you guys post game about the offensive line. The pass protection was good in some spots, right? But it wasn't as good. It wasn't like a game where you come out of it and say, wow, the line looks great. Like it was not that kind of game. Murdad says, is it me or has Daniel Jones fooled us all? Daniel always does just enough to show you like, hey, believe in me. This is the thing about Daniel. Like, and also like if you're around him and you watch him after these types of games, like he is a competitor. Like guys like competing with him. He is not a guy who wilts after he makes a mistake. He's a I think like the other day, of course, there were plays that you're just shaking your head and saying, here we go again. But then you have the 12-yard scramble on 2nd and 14. You have the 44-yard completion to Slayton. You have, I think he was 6 of 9 for 68 yards on that 2-minute drive at the end of the half. Of course, they didn't get in the end zone. But, he does make always enough plays to make you come back one more time and say, let me see it. Let me see it one more time. Because I saw enough to say that I'm not fully out. That's really what Daniel has been, even when he struggles. You tell me, says Daniel Jones cannot lead receivers. He has no pocket field to create. He will get the receivers hurt trying to catch those high or behind throws. Hey, it's progress for the Giants if he's protected long enough to get the ball up in the air. Right? He may have a good throw now and again, but even a good drive or two, but he's not capable of sustaining any acceptable level of play. And this is Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen were hired to either improve or change the quarterback situation and the offensive situation and the team's win-loss record, right? This is what they're here to do. This is what they're here to do. All right. Chris says, good evening, Pat and the Talkin' Ball chat. Good evening, Chris. Great to see you. Thanks for being here. Brick City says, what really happened to Tyree Jackson and wasn't he supposed to be an emergency quarterback? Brick City, that was definitely one of those things where I heard Brian Daboll say that he was going to be their emergency third quarterback. And the first thing in the back of my mind was, Pat, you probably shouldn't tweet that yet because that's one of those things that he's saying, but is probably not going to happen. And I tweeted it anyway because it's obviously came out of the coach's mouth, but I was absolutely 100% correct. Never came to pass. He ended up getting injured and cut. They weren't working him at quarterback in practice from what we saw, really. I mean, he was playing tight end in 11 on 11. He was working with the tight ends. He just had an understanding of their offense going back years ago to Buffalo. But I think it was a lot of window dressing going on with whatever Locke has going on. And then Drew Locke actually told us, yeah, like it really hurts on my hip and I can't really throw that well. He was still dressed in uniform for that game in Houston, but obviously was not capable of playing in that game. So what happened with Tyree Jackson is he got a back injury that cropped up. It looked like it cropped up after he took a hit from Tyler Nubin at the goal line in a practice last week on a throw from Tommy DeVito kind of into that hit. And then he came back to practice and then DeVito had a low throw that Jackson dove for, caught during Thursday's practice. But when he got up, he was in serious pain. He threw his helmet on the ground. He was really upset. You could tell right away he was injured. He knew it. And that was that. They waived him injured and they had Jacob Johnson in Tyree Jackson's number basically the very next day, literally playing in a game before he practiced. Michael, what's going on? He says, look, I get the frustration with Jones, but it's his first game back from injury. And as much as I hate to say it, it's preseason. Get the struggles out of the way now and hope for the better come week one. That's the most optimistic way that you can look at it, Michael. And like I said, he is their best quarterback option by leaps and bounds. John Moog says, in answer to my offensive identity description, he says, what passing game? Ouch. Gary says, hey, what's up, Pat? Gary, good to see you. You tell me, says Theo Johnson, the rookie tight end, is a monster and he can catch. Yeah. Theo Johnson's definitely going to play. I mean, you saw him, Daniel Bellinger, Chris Manhertz all getting serious playing time at tight end for the Giants in that game. Like I told you, the top three. Lawrence Cager had been factoring into that top three until he got injured. But Theo, they're definitely trying to get him on the field. Let's see. Rich S says, Pat, what's up, my guy? Isn't the national media piling on overreacting to Daniel Jones' bad preseason showing? It's like he looked completely inept. Just two really boneheaded plays in a game that doesn't count. Yeah, Rich, I view, some of the shows out there right now in some of these networks. I mean, I've tried for many years to, you try to understand the way that this content gets created and these shows work, and you understand that they have to generate ratings, right? They have to generate ratings to attract advertisers, and they have to try to move the needle for sure. And of course, when I'm talking to you guys and when I'm reporting, I'm trying to do things that are entertaining enough that it moves the needle and that it attracts people. But I'm not going to do it at the expense of the truth. I'm not going to do it at the expense of sounding like a bombastic moron, right? I'm not going to say things that are so hyperbolic that the next time I say something, you're not going to know whether to trust it because I'm going above and beyond. And I think that's what you're describing, Rich, is that even some of the opinions from people who are, smart and loud and have great, and they're good at what they do, and they have, a big stage to deliver their messages. I still think some of those things, they just get carried away. They have the soapbox and it becomes a popular topic. I will say, there's a handful of people who, and there's a lot of there's former athletes who do this somewhat, and some people in the media who are former athletes. They wait and see what is a popular opinion on Twitter or on X, and then they come in like an hour later with, something that backs that popular opinion and makes people retweet and like and say, "Oh yeah, I always love you because you always know what's right and what's wrong and you always have your finger on the pulse and this is why you are a great player or this is why you're a great analyst." There's a lot of guys out there like that who they wait to see which way the wind blows and then they jump on board. So that's probably what's happening here. Easy topic for people to jump on and say, oh, Daniel Jones stinks. Hopefully you're getting a more nuanced discussion here from me than that. Let's see. Tommy says health and wealth to all. John Moog calls Daniel Captain Checkdown. Let's see. Dr. Garrett says, what's up, Pat? Dr. Garrett. Yeah, look at Jason Garrett. Look at that. Look at that shot of Jason Garrett. Look at that. Jason Garrett, by the way, nice guy. But I will just never forget that game in New Orleans, which actually was their best offensive game that year, with Kadarius making plays. Kenny Golladay made a play. Saquon making plays. There was a play at the goal line where I called out what was about to happen on the play call because of the formation and where they were lined up and the down and distance and all that. I knew what they were going to run, and the Saints knew it too. And I looked at whoever was next to me. I said, if I knew that, obviously the Saints knew that, right? So that's one story I always remember. He says, what's up, Pat? Jones doesn't have it between the ears. Ball never comes out on time. Still can't feel pressure and slide in pocket like most quarterbacks. Every throw seems so difficult. 7 and 10. 7's optimistic, Dr. Garrett. 7 is optimistic. It's funny you say that about the ball not coming out on time, Doctor. I said in our last chat, and this is something from watching Daniel a lot. This can be true for a lot of QBs, but anytime you see Daniel step, plant his back foot and then just rip it, it's going to be completed normally, those throws. Anytime he hesitates even a little bit, that's when the mistakes and the bad plays happen. You know, like he needs to drop, set, and rip. That's when he's good. You know, when it doesn't happen like that, that's when the disasters come into play. You Tell Me says you're right, D Kit. He's not cerebral. 2 drives a game. Dr. Guy says O-line looked really good, but we still have 8. I didn't think it looked really good. I thought it looked good in spots, and I thought it didn't totally collapse on itself like the beginning of last season, for example. But I do think there's room for improvement there. Like I went back and watched the clips from the first half today. I mean, it was far from this looks great, you know. D says the things he does, the way he plays the position is at the level of a good backup. You can throw in there if your starter goes down. Can't be QB1 if you want to win, very much like Josh Dobbs. Barb, is there any chance the starters get in a few plays against the Jets? I do think some of them get in. I don't think the A-listers do. I think that the Giants are banged up enough right now where they're going to probably prioritize health. Tommy says preseason shake rust off. Wish they kept building off Lions game. Unfortunately, a bunch of improvement needed across the board, but there is young talent for future. Chapman, Shreveport, Baby Hulk. Yeah, I'm interested to see. Hopefully Chapman's fine. I mean, he kind of he got stepped on last game and then played one more play and then hobbled off. No injury update there. They obviously added a D tackle today, but of course that was Ryder Anderson also getting waived. So hopefully nothing to that with Chapman and that he's all right, but we'll see. Jones said, You Tell Me says Jones never leads the receivers for a walk-in touchdown. He has to wait till the receiver's wide open, then it's too late. Rich S says, I've got to say Caleb Williams looks special. We should have tagged. Yeah, he really does. Ryan Poles, who was interviewed in the final 3 for the Giants GM job, now the GM in Chicago, hasn't been perfect for Ryan either, but made that trade that probably is going to save his hide and could end up turning around the entire Chicago Bears franchise. That's the thing. The Giants came in here and they did not get the quarterback. They ended up riding with the same QB. And when they came here, it seemed pretty obvious that they knew it was going to be Daniel Jones for a little bit and then their guy. And now it's Daniel Jones again, right? And he's their guy because they paid him. So, that's where they're at. But yeah, Chicago looks like they're primed. Of course, Keenan Allen's one of the best route runners in the game. Love watching him. I hope he stays healthy. I mean, if he does, that offense could end up being special. Team could end up being special. I agree, though, Rich. Like what we've seen from Caleb so far, he's a special talent. Obviously, he's the first pick in the draft, but some of the plays he's been making early on in the preseason. Now, again, the games don't count. There'll be different schemed up defenses, right, when he walks into week 1. So it's going to get harder. But they definitely, it's hard not to look at that and say that the Bears don't look like they're in really good hands, right? Peter Randazzo says, Pat, keep in mind also that the Texans didn't play their 3 top pass rushers at all. I think the line is improved, but let's see. The jury is still out. Yes, absolutely. And I was really happy that Andrew Thomas said that because I thought that was a really good reflection on it. Wasn't like me or somebody else sounding like a critic of the O-line when it was more promising than it has been in past games saying that. It was the left tackle, the highest paid player on their line, saying that to my face, saying, hey, yeah, some things maybe were good. I'll go back and watch, but they didn't play their 2 top edges. And then as we know, they didn't really play their 3 top pass rushers. Will Anderson Jr., Danielle Hunter, Danico Autry, none of them on the field against the Giants in that game. And still issues with the pass protection in spots. Dave Z says, this bongs for you, Pat. Cheers, Dave. Whatever it takes. John Moog says, don't ruin the old-fashioned with ice. Well, if I were, I'll drink neat, but I actually like a little ice. I don't let it bleed into it so much that it waters it down, John, but I definitely like a king cube. I had like the circular king cube. So I don't normally, I'm not going to throw a bunch of ice cubes in the glass. Got to let it evenly kind of melt in and absorb. Cheers to you. D-Kid says when the bullets start flying and teams scheme for Jones is going to be ugly. He is limited severely. When teams understand that what the Giants are running to get Neighbors the ball, they will adjust. Garrett says our veteran QB wasn't even under center when the play clock was at 1 while Daboll burned a timeout. Year 6 quarterback doesn't know the play clock. This can't be fixed. Tommy says Bo Nix looks like the pick to make. Yeah, that'll be interesting. Like I said, Sean Payton, Bo Nix always seemed like a good marriage and a match. In fact, I believe Phil Simms on this podcast in the spring, way before the draft, said that he felt like that would be a good match and was going to happen possibly. And, I think it's one thing to say, yeah, I can see that fitting Drew Brees type game, type fit. But also, obviously, Daboll is an offensive coach, so he's supposed to be kind of the quarterback whisperer. So it's not like you could say, well, the Giants wouldn't have made it work either, because that's supposed to be his skill set and strength as a coach. JJ McCarthy clearly was the next guy on their board. Not taking him, obviously, they have dodged a bullet at this point with him being out for the year with a torn right meniscus. So there's that. But, Bo Nix, even Michael Penix Jr., man, every time I watched him throw in the offseason, I said, that's the guy. Just saying. D says, Pat, what needs to happen in order for us to be competitive this year? Tell me. Well, I'll tell you one thing. On defense, so far, what I've seen in 2 games from both the backups in the first game and the starters in the second game, I've seen that they give up yards. Okay. They'll give up yards. They'll give up drives. So far, I've seen them hold in the red zone. Okay. I've seen them hold firm in the red zone. Now, if you remember in 2022, Wink Martindale's defense was great at 2 things, third down and red zone. And they weren't giving up touchdowns. They were getting off the field on some key third downs. So they would, there'd be plays given up here and there, but they were not giving up TDs and they were getting off the field when it counted on third. This defense I'm watching of Shane Bowen's looks like so far it's giving up yards. Teams are driving on them. So far, we've seen them hold in the red zone. So to me, if that's your strength and you can do that, great. But you're also playing a little bit with fire if you let that happen continually and you're just counting on strong red zone defense to bail you out. So what needs to happen? I do think they're going to give up a fair amount of yards on defense. So I do think what needs to happen is that red zone strength on defense needs to continue. It needs to be an identity. It needs to be one of those things where we're going to bend but not break. And then not that you want to bend. I just think that's what's going to end up being. So you're in answer to your question. I think it's going to be bend but don't break, red zone defense. You have to thrive there. And then on offense, I think that you need to, and this is going to sound maybe counterintuitive because we started out talking about how they do want to be explosive, right, offensively. But as I said, I think, there's definitely an emphasis on heavier personnel, catch and run, getting those first downs with Neighbors and Wan'Dale Robinson, using the running game, establishing a workable running game with Devin Singletary, with the fullback in the backfield. I think what needs to happen for them to be competitive is, yes, the red zone defense, but on offense, it's not just explosive plays, D-Kit. It is them retaining the ball and driving and having long possessions where they can bleed the clock. They can keep their defense off the field because, listen, it'll be great if the Giants can hit deep shots and score on explosives and those kind of things. That'll be great. But if they're just trying to push the ball downfield and they're spottily successful and their offense is off the field quickly often, then their defense is going to break. This is not a defense where you can just keep throwing them back on the field, I don't think, and they're going to carry the team. I think that'd be asking too much of them. So I think it's going to have to be ball control plus explosives on offense, and then defense, red zone. And then obviously Brian Daboll needs to manage the games properly, especially in those game management situations, those key situations when those decisions are made. Him, the game management team, they need to press the right buttons. That was something he really struggled with last year with his composure. Garrett says, it's not even December, and all I want for Christmas is a quarterback. Barb says, all the quarterback coaches are killing me. Let's see. How do the Giants believe their current QB room is NFL caliber? Seriously. D, it's a very weird situation. You have to admit teams usually either go in knowing their quarterback situation isn't good enough and they change it, or they feel confident in it and they stay. This is one of those foot in on either side of the line where it was like obvious that they knew that they needed an upgrade or to find their successor, and then they end up right back where they started essentially. So, you know, ambivalence could be a word for that, and also just not being effective at really being decisive and finding a solution in a timely manner. Garrett says he would feel better about Ryan Tannehill than Drew Lock, another questionable Joe Shane move. G-Man says, in Daboll, we must trust he'll get ready. He'll get Daniel Jones ready for week 1. Kyokan says 3 and out will be the Giants' identity. Dave says the regular season game plan will be less vanilla, especially if they keep blocking as well as they did. I still think it's Jones's last year here. So do I. Dave Z says, where do they stand on the waiver wire? Well, isn't it generally the draft order from this year? So that would put them at 6, I believe. Barb also says she is waiting to hear about Micah McFadden. Yeah, that's definitely a question we need an answer to for sure. Barbara says, Pat, is Hyatt a bust? No, he's not a bust, but he acknowledged to me, like we had a conversation, he said that late last season was difficult. I mean, he acknowledged like he needs to get open more. He needs to be more consistent, and that's what's going to get him on the field more. It was even interesting to me that they started the Texans game with Hyatt neighbors, Wan'Dale Robinson. Then eventually they put Slayton on the field, and you started to see some things open up a little bit more. And then obviously he makes the big catch to be the catalyst for everything. So he's not a bust, but Barbara, I think you ask the right question here, which is essentially, I think Jalen Hyatt's the kind of player that because of his pedigree coming from college, you know, you get excited about him, his speed, his deep ability. He had a 100-yard game against the Patriots last year, so there has been positive for sure. He's a good kid too. I like Jalen a lot. Like I like him a lot. You know, this is a guy who works, who cares. But it is a reality that he needs to produce more. He needs to do more. He needs to be more consistent as a receiver. And listen, this is just no judgment on Jalen at all. But this is why this guy won the Bolitnikoff Award in college and then was not drafted until the 3rd round. That is very unusual, right? So clearly there were concerns. Obviously, they're well documented now, but there were concerns about how well-rounded of a receiver would he be in the NFL. He was in this explosive Tennessee offense, running a lot in the slot, running a lot down the field. So how would that translate? You know, I like Jalen a lot. I mean, he was close to a crazy catch in that Texans game, that one-handed catch on the sideline. And that was a really good throw by Daniel Jones there too. He also had a step on Stingley on the Jones interception. Now, Stingley did recover. I mean, Jones would have had to really throw that over his head for that to be a catch. I mean, he did beat him, but Stingley, like that was good coverage. I mean, if you go back and watch that play, like, oh boy, that's a guy you don't throw at. You see a guy do that. It's like, oh, I'm going to stop throwing the ball over there. You know? Chris says Hyatt is a second-year player with limited reps, had 40 targets last year. Definitely not a bust. Yeah, no, not a bust. But also, Chris, I do think Barbara, you know, she's hinting at this idea that, like, I think the perception of Hyatt is that he's this big weapon who it's time to, you know, unleash him. But the reality is he's a young player who still needs to put it together, has shown some good things, but does still need to grow. And that's his own admission, right? And the 40 targets also, part of that is him, like initially it was the playbook. It was him getting the whole offense together early on. That was an issue. Remember, he started camp really low on the depth chart. He was like with the 3rd string offense as a rookie at first in training camp. And then once he played a lot as a rookie, it was tough for him, you know, to just produce at volume, you know, get open enough to get all those targets and all that. So learning curve for Hyatt, but they're hoping that he can take a step this year. Dave Z says, after Jones is out next year, do you think they will draft someone or bring in a stopgap until they can draft Arch Manning? That's a great question, Dave Z. That's a great question. Your question answers itself, which is that is probably going to be a consideration. Justin says, "Hey Pat, thank you for all the great coverage you do." Thank you, Justin. What are the chances they trade a wide receiver like Slayton prior to week 1? Yeah, that's interesting, Justin. I was digging on that today. I was not able to turn up as much as I was looking for, but um, you know, it was so funny, like how I know he had a drop in the game against the Texans, but that was kind of a play where he ran into the sun and turned around to a pass that I don't even think he saw the ball. If you saw how the stadium was, they had like part of the roof open. So he ran into the sun, turns around, and it's just the glare and drops it. Uh, but him making that big play to me, like that felt like it was good timing for him, a reinforcement of the um, reinforcement of kind of the value that he brings, that he's always known that he brought, the reason that he stayed away early spring, trying to get some of that contract redone. He's changed agents now. You know, Justin, it's interesting. I think, do they have the luxury to get rid of a guy like Slayton? I mean, I don't think they do. Of course, that would be just putting your eggs all in the Jalen Hyatt basket. And then, maybe in that case, then that's how, Allen Robinson gets on the roster, that type of stuff. Um, I will say, I'm disappointed Allen Robinson didn't get any run with Daniel Jones. I mean, I think if he did, he would get open and have catches and make plays. Like, I think that should have happened. But yeah, Justin, Slayton is an evergreen player to watch for a trade right now. And like I said, I don't think they can quote unquote afford to trade him right now based on their offensive weapons and what he can do for them. But given the contract situation, given the fact that there are teams out there looking for players like that, we already talked about like the Lions coming in here needing a third wide receiver, that type of stuff. So, he remains a guy to watch, and especially the second if and when this season starts going poorly, I think Darius Slayton as a trade makes a lot of sense. Chris says, I was hoping Ryder Anderson would make the 53. Yeah, I'm really bummed for Ryder. Eric says, I would think Brian Burns is putting in a word for JC Horn. Interesting. Possible. Why would the Panthers do that? That would be, why would the Panthers trade JC Horn though? Guys like Ryder Anderson, you have to take care of your body. Can't stay healthy. You got another soft tissue injury. Apparently they had enough. The Giants have a lot of soft tissue injuries, so it's not just Ryder, but Vince says that pick 6 was a really bad look, no doubt. What's the word on Micah Hyde? Is he still a free agent, and can we sign him? Let's see. What's Micah Hyde doing these days? Micah Hyde is a free agent at the moment. Did he have an injury he was nursing? Let's see. I know the Bills are really banged up as well. Okay. So Micah Hyde said in the spring, he said it's Bills or retire. So he said in the spring that he would like to play for the Bills again. And otherwise he was done playing football. So that was in May. Perhaps he's changed his mind, but that was in May. Dave Z says, smart. Don't load up on Georgia, Alabama, or Ohio State guys. Load up on Minnesota guys, SMH. Drew Lock's health, what's going on there? What did he play this preseason? 2 bad series. Yeah, he's got that strained oblique and the hip pointer that has him out at least a couple weeks. That was a real injury diagnosis. Like the Giants have been playing this game of charades where they said he was fine, and then Daboll said, "Oh, maybe he'll play," but he's hurt. I mean, he said that it hurts when he throws. Otherwise, he would just throw. By the way, I don't know if I clarified this for you guys or not. He actually got hurt earlier than the play that he went down on. He got hurt on the play where he quote unquote was called for a fumble, and then he had they called it an interception on review. He got hit by 3 different Lions linemen, pass rushers on that play. Let's see. All right. Tommy for one says, to be realistic, Jones is the best option. Tommy or Locke aren't the answer, sadly to say. So Jones needs to have that 2022 playbook. Unfortunately for Mara, they overpaid Jones for that. He really is the best option. There's no question about it. As much as you're discouraged by that performance, he is. Vince G says, no matter what happens, I want Daboll and Shane to stay. Let's see. Eric says if they really want Arch Manning, then they should just keep Jones and start him to lock in a top draft pick. Chris Peace, excuse me, says, I thought today was your day to be positive, D-Kit. That is funny. If Daniel Jones wins enough games to not get a quarterback, do you think he stays or we trade up and address Jones with a pay cut offer or cut him, says for sure. So if it's a good season, a strong offensive season, a strong Daniel Jones season, and the Giants are contending for a playoff spot, like that type of thing, then he's your quarterback next year for sure. I mean, no question about it. If he wins just enough if he stays healthy and plays and they win a similar amount of games to last year, then he's not your quarterback. Shout out Pat Leonard and shout out Elijah Chapman, no doubt for sure. Remember, guys, super chats, super stickers. They bring your question or comment to the top of the chat. And if you're not purchasing a super chat or a super sticker, you could always just hit the like button. It's a great way to support the channel. Really appreciate that. And thanks for all your comments and questions and for being here as always, Giants fans. Tommy says, bring in Pat Shurmur for the consultation or quarterback coach, OC, or something, anything other than Jones looking like his turnover self. Something has got to give at this point. Dumpers Juice Danny is killing us. Wow, all kinds of nicknames coming out here. Bluegrass says, Authentic brought me here too last year. Authentic is the man. Thanks for being here, Bluegrass. What's good, Hirsch? Good to see you. Whoa, D-Kit. All right, I'm taking issue with you here. He says, you got to work on your game fit, Pat. Just saying. Wow, D-Kit, you didn't like the Salaretta fit? Holy cow. This is stop the presses here, man. I was feeling good that day. I got comments in the locker room about the sport coat. People were liking it. Players were liking it. What you got? You got issue with the Salaretta swag? Come on. Killing me. But let me hear it. What do you got? Chris, did you just say Authentic went 5 hours and 40 minutes today? Is that what you just said? For show says O-line and wide receivers are obviously not an excuse this year. I don't like the thought process that everything's good around Daniel and it's just him. Like that is not true. I do not agree with that. I don't agree with that. Like I think Andrew Thomas's point was, let's see how we do against the best. We didn't play the best today. They didn't play their best guys. Jones, no excuse for Jones. That's not what I'm saying. But I reject the suggestion coming out of the Houston game that it's clear that everything's fine. And if Daniel screws up, it's just on him. I don't agree with that. For show, KB says, who or what position do we think we target on the waiver wire? And what position do you think we'll trade for if so? It could happen. If Slayton were traded, I would think they'd be getting another weapon back somewhere. You can't just trade Slayton and not bring in another offensive weapon. I don't see the logic in that. I think corner 2 is probably the most likely spot that they need to find an upgrade, need to find a player. Like I said, depending on Micah McFadden's health and really just their depth at that position, inside linebacker. Because remember, Shane Bowen values the inside linebackers big time. He puts a lot on the inside linebackers, and they are really banged up. And also, frankly, the talent that you see there, you have Okereke. There's some things Micah does well, especially in the running game. And then, Deontay Johnson's athletic. He's hungry. I like him as a player. But I could see inside linebacker, interior defensive line, The inside linebacker is one to watch, I think. Like, I think Shane Bowen, that's a position he prioritizes. And let's say Micah McFadden's in jeopardy of week 1, for example. If that's the case, that's a position I would have my eye on, though I don't know exactly what's out there as far as like what could you acquire in a trade. Franklin says, "Hey, Pat, may have missed it, but what's your idea of the additional cap space we freed up? Any idea of players or positions you'd think the Giants could target? Please give a shout out to my fiance, Ashley." Ashley, shout out to you. Shout out to Franklin. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being diehard Giants fans. Thanks for being talking ballers and participating in the chat. Really appreciate you guys. And congratulations on the engagement, though it may have happened a little while ago, but congrats to you, Ashley. Shout out to you. Thank you, Franklin, for dropping that question in. And yes, we did talk a little bit about that. Franklin, my view of the cap space being freed with the Andrew Thomas restructure is that the Giants are looking at the trade market more so than the free agent market, is my guess. If you guys notice, the players they've been signing to play for them in the preseason as they've been dropping like flies at different positions, like running back, linebacker, etc. These have all been minimum deals, split salary deals, which means like if a guy is not on the active roster, goes on the practice squad, that his salary drops dramatically. It's not just like one flat salary that averages out per week, and no guaranteed money in these deals. Like they've been bargain hunting, bargain shopping. So I think they're freeing this to be able to have some ability to make acquisitions come waiver wire day. So they're going into this Jets week. Of course, they need to get through it by practicing against the Jets to have enough bodies, practice, game, etc. And then cut down day, I think it's not just going to be waiver claims. I think you got to look at the trade market and what they're going to be operating with as well there. I think that's something to watch. And positions we talked about, linebacker, defensive tackle, corner. D-Kit thinks they should go trade for a quarterback or sign a quarterback. Running back even looks like a position of concern with Tyrone Tracy injured. Michael, great to see you. Let's see. Thanks for being here. Michael Knight, as always. KB says, Singletary looks solid, but I still think we need a bruiser powerhouse running back, or do you think our fullback will play that role? No, I think that Tyrone Tracy looks like he's going to play that back in their current construction of their roster and play that role. We'll see how long he's out for, though. That's part of the reason I was saying, I wonder what they're going to do with the running back position. Boy, that would be rich if Joe Shane was going out to pay a running back, though, wouldn't it? That can't. That can't happen. Trading for a running back, you're paying a lot of money. Come on. Singletary also, by the way, 10 carries for 20 yards, including one 10-yard carry in that game. So good player, but the run game wasn't exactly there. Big Jim says, what can we expect for joint practice this week? Any position battles to keep an eye on? I know with Ryder Anderson's release and Andrew Thomas's signing bonus restructure, they're primed for a move. Certainly looks like they're giving themselves options there. No doubt about it. Again, disappointing that like Hassan Reddick, for example, is not somebody that Andrew Thomas can go against in these joint practices because he's holding out. Quinnen Williams against the Giants interior offensive line is a key one to watch. Of course, one of the best defensive tackles in the league year in and year out. So no better test than that as far as what's happening right up front on the interior, which the Giants believe that they've upgraded. Of course, we'll be watching John Runyon Jr. He's had the shoulder. He didn't play in the last game. We'll see how he's faring. I think that from the Jets angle and from the Giants pass rush angle, you always want to see how the Giants pass rush, are they going to be able to wreck games because they have a lot invested there. Didn't hear a lot from Thibodeau, Lawrence, and Burns in the early going of that game against the Texans. Can they kind of make the Jets pay? The Jets they got, Tyron Smith, Tippmann, Simpson, Vera Tucker, Moses, etc. Can the Giants edges and their defensive line and pass rush have success on Aaron Rodgers and the Jets, to make you feel good about their ability to wreck games, because that pass rush is the defense's best path to holding their own. And then, I think we all know that the Giants secondary is a concern against a receiving core like the Jets and a passing game like the Jets, most likely. Tyrod Taylor going against the Giants. That'll be fun to watch. Tyrod kind of showing them what they're missing potentially. And then, the headliner to me, obviously, is Sauce Gardner against Malik Neighbors. I think that'll be fascinating. I can't wait to see that one. I hope we see it in individuals. I hope we see it in 7-on-7. I hope we see it at 11-on-11. I hope it's all day, every day. I think that's going to be must see. I'm interested in the fact that they're still doing this practice because the Jets were basically full on brawling with the Carolina Panthers. And the Giants were full on brawling with the Detroit Lions. And, it'll just be interesting to see if they can actually keep their cool for this one, because that would seem to be difficult for these two teams going up against other teams that aren't even the Jets and Giants, and they hate each other, right? All right. Just want to tell you guys quickly about Boom Chaga, our sponsor, and then we'll get right back into the quick queue and the questions. Not going 5 hours like Authentic, I can promise that. But man, that is impressive. All right. Talking Ball with Pat Leonard live is brought to you by the Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink right here over my shoulder. A natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants and heart-healthy compounds. You can easily pour this natural liquid supplement into any of your favorite drinks. I put mine in my coffee every morning and immediately feel the difference. I personally have felt a post-workout-like energy boost with Boom. Chaga also has the ability to lower cholesterol, reduce inflammation, and improve immune and heart health with beta-glucans and antioxidants. Go to boomchaga.com today to place your first order. And if you use the discount code TalkinBall25 or access it through the QR code on your screen, you will get 25% off your first subscribe and save order. Right now, that means a month's supply costs only $30. Start feeling the difference today. Boomchaga.com. Subscribe and save. Talking Ball 25. Buy it for 30, and then you can cancel out the subscription. No harm, no foul if you don't want to stay subscribed. Also brought to you by BetOnline and by Estate 98 Coffee, an all-natural specialty coffee with no sugar that is convenient for on-the-go professionals and parents. Estate98.com/talkingball to get a special buy one, get one free deal. 10 seconds to make an iced coffee and a minute more to make a hot coffee or latte. All right. Michael Knight says, why didn't the Giants sign Ryan Tannehill as a backup? Well, looking around the league, Michael, it looks to me like, even look at the Chargers backup situation, like Tannehill's not on a team like that. That's, doesn't really have a capable backup. Could be that Tannehill's biding his time, waiting for the right opportunity where he feels like he's going to be able to get the most playing time if and when he does sign. So to me, it could be as most about that as anything. Looks like I missed a super chat down here. D-Kid says, Michael Penix Jr., a terrible miss by the Giants. Yeah, you hope it doesn't turn out that way. D-Kid says, Pat, I can't help myself tonight, though. Things look bad. No, listen, it's totally your prerogative as a Giants fan to walk out of Saturday's game feeling dejected and discouraged. That's a reasonable takeaway from that game. I think it's an incomplete process. It's an incomplete team. It's a team that has clear weaknesses, and it is concerning. But I think you have to try to hang your hat on Neighbors, on the fact that, listen, Jones is healthy and on the field. I mean, if he wasn't healthy and on the field and it was Locke and DeVito, it'd be tough. Hirsch says Dante Miller will turn out to be our best running back. Yeah, he's got a hamstring though, and Daboll was kind of tamping down the hype on Turbo. So I like Turbo a lot too. I don't know if they're trying to sneak him down to the practice squad or what it is. But yeah, I think he can help them. I think that's a player who can help them for sure. But Daboll kind of, at least his answer was he needs to do all the other things well, not just the running fast part. Let's see. Honestly, if someone shines in preseason, we say it's only preseason, but if someone like Jones does poorly, it's the end of the world. Yeah, it's kind of one of those things where it's like you don't want to over-evaluate, but you do want to try to take something from the moments that feel like it was real game action or feels like it was an honest and true evaluation. The closest you get to that for show is when it's best on best, like Daniel Jones going up against the Texan starters or whatever. Like even the frustrating part about that game is that Daniel and the starters, they didn't really get anything going until the Texans took their first defense off the field. Obviously, it was a first defense missing a lot of players as well. Eric says, Fash, the dude literally came out and put on a clinic of bad until the scrubs came in for Houston. It seemed like the universe was telling us something. Eric just basically beating me to it. No update on the McFadden hip injury, but to me, a little bit concerning, Antonio. Like if this is costing him a couple weeks or something like that, could we be inching towards a week 1 question? That's what I think we have to answer. Vince says Theo was open for a second, then Daniel Jones hesitated and threw a pick 6. By that point, the ball already should have been out of his hand, though. Like he was under pressure. The pressure was created by the fact that he held the ball looking, right? So that was the problem there. Joe says, so what you're telling us about Daniel Jones is that he overthinks. I think, I think what it is too is like he is a physically impressive quarterback. I mean, when you stand next to him, he's a big guy, like, and he's an athlete, no question about it. But I think when he is not decisive, physically, he does not overcompensate for that indecision. If that makes sense, right? He can be decisive, and he has been decisive. But when he sees something and it turns out it's not there, right? When he hesitates, because that happens to other quarterbacks. But it's not easy. But can you use your legs to make a play? Can you run? Can you scramble to throw? Can you keep your eyes down the field? When it's not clean, can you still make just as good of a play as if it was a clean pocket, right? Yes, you have to hope John Michael Schmitz being back makes a difference. Hopefully he continues to acclimate from that shoulder. They had him on a pitch count the other day. Seems like the Tom Eli curse continues. Black cloud hovering over the Giants organization year after year, says Tommy. Just the worst from coaches to draft picks. Disappointment seems to be the norm every season. And there's some people who have lasted that entire time and not left the building. Dave Z says, do you think they will upgrade this year and give out large Pepsis? Pepsi not sponsoring the gate at the stadium now, I noticed. D says, I heard Keenan Allen put on 20 pounds. Any truth to this? Brings back Kelvin Benjamin memories. I'm not sure about that. I hadn't heard that. We'll look into that. That's interesting. I hope not for his sake. I mean, all those like knee and hamstrings and quads and stuff, you got to get less weight on top of your legs, not more. Lewis says Singletary and Gray are not on the same level as Tracy and Turbo Miller. Hope the rookies get healthy before game 1. Singletary, Tracy's good. Looks pretty good so far. Has had some ball security issues at times in camp, but looked really good against the Lions, I thought. To me, their best 1-2 punch is Singletary Tracy. That's the punch. Michael says, hey, Pat, what's the practice schedule look like this week leading up to the Jets game? So the Giants are going to practice on Tuesday. We actually talked to Brandon Brown at noon, and then they have a practice at 12:45 to 2:45. Then they'll have the joint practice against the Jets, 1 p.m. Florham Park on Wednesday. And then they'll have an 11:45 practice on Thursday leading into Saturday night's game at MetLife Stadium. So that's the schedule for the week. Undefined. What's up, Undefined? He says you could put Jones' mistakes off in bad coaching. He could be coached to run his reads and put it in the stands if he doesn't see anything. Parcells got Testaverde to cut down on stupid mistakes. Yeah, I agree with that a little bit, Undefined. Like, there is, I think that's a really good point. I think, like we were talking about, Bo Nix, Sean Payton. Like, if Bo Nix turns out well, a lot of people are going to say, well, yeah, he went to Sean Payton, But that's what Brian Daboll is supposed to be. Brian Daboll is supposed to be an offensive guru who solves quarterbacks, right? So Eric Butler says, come on, people, hit the like button. 112 people in the chat and not even half that many likes. Yes, please hit those likes, guys. Please hit those likes. Really appreciate it. It takes only a second. Just hit the like button while we are live. I'm telling you, I don't know why, but the live likes in the algorithm, they mean more. It makes a difference. Thank you to everyone so far who's purchased the super chats, D-Kit, Joe. Really appreciate you guys chipping in. Peter Randazzo as well, really contributing to the chat. Can't thank you enough. That is a good way to get your comment or question answered first. and your opinion addressed right at the top of the chat with those super chats. All right. Solving says, do you think Bellinger tight end spot is in jeopardy? A lot of tight ends on the roster, and then they sign a fullback. It's still early, but Theo was disappointing too, honestly. Thoughts? I think Bellinger is definitely a guy who's getting a strong evaluation. It looks like he has been tracking to play with the ones. I do think that he is not an adequate enough blocker for what they're looking for, but he is a draft pick. So we'll see. I do think Jacob Johnson's signing was not a good sign for Bellinger. It definitely adds to the competition of what they're looking for in that fullback / tight end spot. So yeah, I've thought all along, going back to the spring, going back to June, like in June, Bellinger was buried kind of on the depth chart at one point. And so I thought the writing was on the wall for him to need to show them more. Right now, based on how they're using him, he looks like he's on the roster, but we'll see. I mean, definitely signing Jacob Johnson, considering the role that Bellinger has been placed in now, does not look good for him for the long term. That's for sure. Tommy says, Quinn Ewers, hook 'em horns, Texas gunslinger. We need to make him the priority for next season. Can't let him pass on to another team. Barbara says, even Jim Fossil won a division title with garbage at quarterback in 1997. Killer Cam says, so the Vikings signed Stephon Gilmore. Any whispers around the building about looking at free agent corners? Peterson is still out there. You mean Patrick Peterson, who basically he trashed Daniel Jones, right? I think Pat Pete trashed Daniel Jones. So that would be awkward. No, I don't think that's going to happen. Real Cold says, hey, Pat, how much do you think Mara had a hand in keeping Jones? He was definitely involved, but I don't view this as the Giants GM, Joe Schoen, had his hand forced to sign Daniel either. I mean, Joe Schoen was grinding away in there to get that contract finished at the 11th hour. And certainly John Mara being on the phone with Daniel Jones in the final hour that they were working it out tells you all you need to know about how involved he is. But, I think it's disingenuous to say that, and it's not accurate to say that this was Giants ownership's decision and not front office decision when they kept him. I do think their mistake was flipping their evaluation of what he was. Is he a tag guy? Is he a contract guy? And then ended up going with the contract in the end. Joe says, Pat, honestly, even if Jones is good this year, I don't think it'll be enough to warrant staying with him any longer. Too risky because he's too inconsistent. I mean, like really good. That's what I'm talking about. Like if he's excellent this year and the team wins a ton of games, like he's staying, he's liked in the building. So it's not like he would have a great year and they would dump him. I don't think. Hyatt needs to get on the field because remember, Joe, like that would justify the contract they gave him, right? They would say that was, you already see some people out here saying, 40 million is a bargain, right? Continuing the quarterback market or concerning the quarterback market. So imagine how loud that would get from team friendly people and from fans if he had a strong season, right? Or to be honest, like what if that actually turns out to be the case, because he's playing so well? You'll never hear the end of it. Alex says Hyatt needs a quarterback who will lead him on passes. He's not a strong physical receiver. Let him go and get it. That's for sure. Tommy says ESPN Fantasy has Neighbors at wide receiver 24 ahead of Zay Flowers, Ridley, Tank Dell, Higgins, Pickens. They must not watch what's going on because Tank Dell will easily be top 15 on the list. Probably also thinking there about volume, Tommy, considering like you saw, Neighbors was on an offense in that first half that had, did virtually nothing and ended up with, what was it? Like 6 for 54 or something like that. I mean, he was on a bad offense for a whole half and still ended up, producing, right? So fantasy wise, I think, he'll be a good guy to have as long as he's healthy. Not if Daniel Jones isn't playing though. Barbara says, Pat, you understood me perfectly on Hyatt. We all had high hopes with all the publicity he got. Oh, absolutely, Barbara. You're right on the nose. OG says, I don't trust the organization to draft the right quarterback in next year's draft. They were lucky they got Eli Manning because they drafted Phillip Rivers, Phil Simms, Kerry Collins, Eli Manning, the best three for real. Barbara says, you can't get rid of Slate. Solving says, just watch the all 22 film. Looks like Neighbors takes plays off and runs lazy routes when he knows the ball isn't coming his way. Oh, that's an interesting observation. Looked gassed in the first quarter. Did you notice anything like that? The only thing I noticed was on Daniel Jones's run, his 12-yard scramble. Looked like Neighbors was blocking well and then suddenly just kind of released off of his block. I mean, maybe he was trying not to hold because he was engaged so long. Remember, a rookie also was going into that game. Clearly, Daboll was like, let's get this guy a catch immediately. I mean, Daniel Jones forced that first pass right to him. So I'll have to watch the routes again. I don't know, because like even the first route where they forced the ball to him, that was a weird looking route. It wasn't like he charged back to the ball on that like stop route he ran there, or that hitch. And the ball was still coming to him though. So I don't know. I wouldn't say I noticed laziness. No. But I'll go back and look for sure. Definitely a rookie learning. I mean, the kid's 21. He's 21 years old. It's hard to remember. He's 21. It's nuts. And that he's who they're counting on. Peter Randazzo says our linebacker room is really thin right now. How concerned are you? Very. I agree. I think that has to be something that Shane Bowen right now is thinking a lot about, that inside linebacker room, because that's a position he prioritizes. He actually said, there's a quote from him in the spring. He said that, this defense puts a lot on inside linebackers, and that's the group that he counts on the most. So those injuries, it's piling up. It's not a good thing. Lewis says Joe Shane made a big mistake not extending Slayton this year at the beginning of training camp when he was looking to stay here. Interesting. Tommy says Slayton seems to be the only wide receiver Jones can throw to confidently. It's Jones needing to get the ball to the open receivers. Was a bunch of them open? Let's see. Eric says, OG, they forgot Duke produces first rounders in basketball twice in my lifetime with bad results. OG says, bring back Jerry Reese. Jerry Reese gets a name mentioned in the chat. Tommy says Giants should have made the move for Gilmore. He was cheap enough for the production, and helping the young secondary for sure was a miss on Joe's part. Yeah, it's like they haven't been able to pay for it or willing to pay for it. I mean, I also think, I don't know. I was going to say, I thought Stephon Gilmore was going to end up signing with a contender, but I mean, Minnesota doesn't really look like a contender, but that ends up being his pick. So obviously if he was going to sign with Minnesota, given their outlook, then he could have signed with New York just as easily with the right offer for sure. So fair point. Safe to say the Giants quarterback for the next 3 to 5 years isn't on this roster, says Barbara. Yeah, probably safe to say. Alex says, Pat, do you think Daniel Jones is the worst starting quarterback in the league? No, I don't. I think, let me see. Like Gardner Minshew, is he worse than Gardner Minshew? I mean, I don't think so. Who else am I leaving out there? I mean, Bryce Young might end up as a number 1 overall pick being better than Jones this year and then forever, but he wasn't good last year. Sam Darnold. I mean, is Sam Darnold better than Daniel Jones? I mean, he hasn't been yet, is he? I don't know. No, he's not the worst starting quarterback in the league, but he's not one of the best. OG says, Pat, what's good? It's going to be a bad season. I'll sit this one out, not letting Daniel Jones fool me again. Sorry to hear that, OG. El Gigante says, the main thing is I can't find or remember a 6-year starting quarterback that still has so much to prove. When someone shows you who he is, believe them. I think that's as fair of a criticism of Jones and of the Giants as you're going to get. Chris says, thank you, Chris, for the super chat. He says, I do think hits have added up. Jones looks punch drunk. Yeah, well, I will say this, Chris, like last year, Daniel Jones's decision-making and his ability to play was compromised by how much he was getting hit and pressured early. That's absolutely true. 100% true. So, I don't think he looked like he was bailing out of plays in this game against the Texans, which is good in the pocket. So I didn't see that, but definitely that can happen. And we saw that happen last year. So all the more reason why this offensive line needs to be fixed, like really fixed. Let's see. D Kid says, Pat, I'd like to see you in one of those Adidas tracksuits with a huge New York chain. Oh, okay. I see. All right. Maybe we'll go like smart casual one time. What do you think? You like really challenge the players look is what you're saying is kind of what you're getting at. I got you. I always like the sport coat look, but maybe I gotta smarten it up. Franklin says, looking glass half full, this year may be the most obvious chance to see if Daniel Jones is the player most to blame after the offseason additions, which is what Shane wanted. It could be that. I do think it's unfair to say, hey, everything's fixed, so it's only Jones now. I don't think that's true. But with Neighbors, and if the O-line really is better, it could end up being his best chance to do so. I would agree with that. Bark26 says, love you, Pat. Saquon, is that you? No, just kidding. Thank you, Bark. Really appreciate that. Knowledge the college kid says Daboll doesn't value bruisers, never had one even in Buffalo. He likes zone runners, one cut and go north with Pat's catching ability. No doubt, Knowledge, you know the deal. Smart comment there. Lou says, why doesn't anyone understand that Jones hasn't played since last November? I get people are frustrated too. I get frustrated too, but I'm not going to base this season on one preseason game. Obviously, totally fair. Tommy says Daboll keeps wishing Jones will turn into Allen, but needs to wake up and not lose his job running 12 and 13 personnel. The offense hasn't shown anything much to do otherwise against top D lines. Yeah, that's fair too. Let's see. Dave Z says, boom, chaga. That's right. Yeah, guys, I encourage you to try Boom Chaga. I encourage you to try Estate 98. So it's boomchaga.com. And it's also Estate 98. Estate98.com/talking ball. Buy one, get one free. Buy one, get one free sale. Great product. Great product. Can't say enough about it. Big Jim says, I think you could get Bob Papa to say Boom Chaga after the Giants score a touchdown in their final preseason game. Ask him at practice tomorrow. Yeah, good call. Let's see. Iconic says, what's up, Pat? How is Evan? When is he coming back? So he's back at practice. As far as game action, Iconic, I think the fact that he was still not in uniform for this game, not a good sign for going into the season. Wouldn't surprise me looking at that if he's a guy that ends up on the PUP list to start the season, to be honest with you. Looks like it could be trending in that direction, but we'll see what he gets into. You know, that'll be something to watch in these Jets practices as well. How much is he actually able to do? Get some John Madden AI to say Boom Chaga, says Dave Z. That's a really good idea. Boom. Let's see. Tommy says, can't wait till Bill Belichick comes back home and turns the franchise around with his revenge year. Mike says, what do you think Danny Dimes' problem is? Correct me if I'm wrong. It looks like he doesn't really read the field well and looks to force the ball to one read, causing him to throw a pick or get sacked. I do think he's not the only one. I think there's a lot of quarterbacks in the league who you would be surprised don't read the field as well as you would think. You know, there have been some plays in camp where we've seen Jones again, like throwing the ball to places without properly reading the coverage. That happens to everybody. Like Dak is another good example. People will tell you has had an enormous seasons, great seasons, nearly won the MVP last year, doesn't read the field as well as you would think type stuff. You know, but yeah, I do think it's reading the field is partially an issue. It's just one of those things. Like if it's what he expects it to be, it's going to look good. If it's not, it's not. D Kid says Jones decisively threw his first pass off of Stingley's chest. Rarely do I just break down laughing during these, but you got me there. He did decisively throw that first pass off of Stingley's chest. This is what drives you nuts, though. Like, honestly, if you knew the Giants and how they operated in the first preseason game and how they failed to get Malik Neighbors even a target, let alone a catch in the first game, you knew Brian Daboll was coming out. You knew they wanted to throw to him early. You're Stingley. You see him the second that Neighbors puts his foot down on the ground, you jump the route. He throws it right to you. I mean, nothing else to say. DK, you said it perfectly. Mike says, hopefully DJ was forcing the ball because he's not used to having a good line and because this is his first game back in 9 months. I'm hoping he adapts well to the real pace and gets the balls out. OG says, Giants are the only organization that kept a mediocre QB for 6 years, expecting him to be great. If he gets hurt by week 6, then what? What makes you think he'll play the entire season? Yeah, no, I mean, at a certain point, they'll have a reason to pull the plug for sure, especially with the injury guarantee at the end of the year. He needs to be able to pass his physical the following spring in order for them not to be on the hook for all those millions. So, yeah, no, it's bleak. The point I was making earlier, OG, was just that they don't have anything better behind him as far as we can see. Drew Lock is Drew Lock. Tommy DeVito is Tommy DeVito. It's not like the cavalry's coming right now. D says, booze it up, Pat. It seems like the right thing to do at this point, always. OG says, you all forgot the 40-0 opener against Dallas last year. Steven says, got to be the most ever talked about preseason game I can remember. Yeah, for sure, right? I remember when it was, I can't take anything out of preseason. Lately, it seems what you see of the offense in pre is what you get. Yeah, I think, it's just the fatigue for sure. I think it's also, there's just this fan base is tired of losing. It's tired of seeing bad, offensive play. I mean, forget the quarterback play for a second. Last year's offense was so bad and so hard to watch and so low scoring. I think it's just anything on a hair trigger right now is setting off lots of Giants fans when it comes to the offense. Alex says Joe Shane gets nervous for everything. I would be too right now looking at my roster. No Mets, no Jets, no Nets. What's up? Good to have you back. Always in the chat. He says, Pat, chat. Mike says, was Daniel's 44-yard dime to Slayton against a first-team corner? No, it was not. That was against a backup. Alex says, I don't know why Daniel Jones slid like that, stuck his neck out right there. Oh, he didn't slide. He basically awkwardly, dove headfirst into somebody or barrel rolled into somebody. It was very weird. No, that was against a guy named Mike Ford, backup corner, I believe was his name, the Texans corner with Slayton there. OG says, this is all John Mara. There's no way in hell they thought Daniel Jones was Josh Allen. The world has gone to shit if people believe Daniel Jones is a top-tier quarterback. What are people watching on Sundays? OG is just, it's bleak in OG's land right now. Brian Boyle, thank you so much. Look at Brian Boyle check in with a $20 super chat. Thank you so much, Brian. Glad you caught us tonight. Brian says, hey, Pat, just joining in. Hope all is well. You too, Brian. Great to see you. He says, rooting hard for Daniel Jones. Not sure he's the guy, but it's way too soon in the year to say he's not. Hoping the new offensive weapons shine and the defense is savage. Go G-Men. I like that you're putting the faith behind Daniel. I really think that you have no choice too at this point, right? This has to be your guy. This has to be the quarterback that's going to take the Giants where they need to go this year. It's all or nothing with him. He's right here over my shoulder. See you there, Daniel. It's all you, baby. It's on his legs. It's on his arm. And it's on Daboll to unlock him and make it right. He's the play caller now. It's his offense. It's now or never. This is going to be the coach's Giants career on the line, the quarterback's Giants career on the line, possibly the GM's Giants career on the line. Brian, thank you so much for supporting the chat. I do think it is important for people to recognize, yes, first game in 9 months. Also, Daniel's dual threat ability, the fact that he is willing to push the ball down the field. Frankly, I actually think he throws a pretty good deep ball. I mean, last year in the Raiders game, he missed Hyatt on a couple deep, but that was when he was throwing awkwardly because his neck was injured. So, I'm not going to sit here and make excuses for a $40 million a year quarterback if he's going to make throws like he did in the red zone backed up there against the Texans. Obviously, that's inexcusable. And even the one to Hyatt that Stingley intercepted down the sideline. That was a great play by the corner, but that has to be further out, no doubt. And he didn't move the ball until the backups came in for the Texans defense. All of that said, Drew Lock's numbers and the way that the offense functioned, the backup offense functioned with him in there against the Lions backup defense, it was ugly. Tommy DeVito did have a couple touchdown drives for the offense when he was in there against Detroit, but his passing numbers are third string passing numbers. He had sack, fumble. They didn't score a single point in the second half against the Texans with him running the offense that whole half. So, it's Daniel or bust, Brian. It's Daniel or bust. Let's see. Alex says, would Jerry Reese consider coming back? Sign us up. I know Jerry Reese wanted to get his hat back in the mix with, other teams. And, he did have some interviews. The NFL has just gone the way of, older coaches, older general managers. They want to hire young. The owners want the next young new thing. So a lot of good people and qualified people end up getting kind of pushed by the wayside. D says Gilmore played for Flores. Apparently they have a good relationship. Yes, for sure. Yes, right. That is the connection there. Barbara says Reese started the problems with bad drafting. He did have plenty of bad drafts, no doubt. He also had several good draft picks that he didn't quite get credit for. Was a professional too. Definitely. Undefined says, I used to get my hair cut in your old neighborhood over on Bustleton. Good bakery a few minutes away with awesome donuts. Yeah, I was in Fox Chase, not far from there. Danish Bakers, is that where you went? Danish Bakers over in Fox Chase. That was a great spot. Go get the sticky buns. Ray says, unless you win a road playoff game as quarterback, you're not better. 85 sacks last year. Yep. He made numerous good throws versus Houston. Yes, especially at the end of the half. Iconic says, Pat, do you think the Texans being a contender made us look worse in the preseason game? Well, the Lions are too, but the Lions, of course, didn't play their starters. So it's possible that if it had been Giants starters against Lions starters, we would have seen something similar. But yes, I do think that was a good example of a good player or a really good team, one of the better teams in the league, playing against one of the worst teams in the league, no doubt. But I think that's, I don't think it made them look worse than they are. I think the Giants are, like, if you wanted to say, just split the top 32 into three, like the Texans are a top third team and the Giants are a bottom third team. Lewis says, I'm not worried. Kay Adams is going to fix Jones. I don't think that was a true report. I think that was a meme on social media that was inaccurate, but I still think that's funny. Ray says, Saquon who? OG says, Pat, stop. Look how many times Eli Manning got sacked. Stop with the excuses for Daniel Jones, people. He's not the only quarterback to get hit. 80s and 90s were full of quarterbacks that got killed, Steve Young, etc. Iconic says, now that we have more money, who is the target? Don't know exactly yet. Been working the phones the last couple of hours. I think the Giants have ample positions to look at. I do think, Iconic, that it's more likely a trade target than a free agent signing. Like, the free agent pool is not really full of, it's not really full of players who are, guys who are going to be highly paid and who are premium players at positions are going to come in, start right away. We're not there with the free agents at the moment. It's more like looking at, okay, does a team have a guy who has a veteran contract, a reasonable but not cheap contract, a glut at that position that they can offload, a surplus? And it's hard to find those types of things at this time of year. It's very difficult to find because usually if it's a good player at a key position, teams aren't exactly looking to offload the guy. So are you going to give up draft capital? Is it going to be a player for player swap where you're taking on more salary? I know, not to throw this out there and get this going, because I know nothing about whether this would actually happen, but for example, like the Niners with Brandon Ayuk, like the Niners supposedly were looking around to see if a team could get involved in a three-way trade that could end up getting a receiver back to them. Because if they're going to trade Ayuk, they want a receiver back. So, could the Giants be a third team in a deal where Slayton goes to the Niners and Ayuk goes somewhere and the Giants get something, right? Like that could be something that transpires. I mean, Joe Shane's definitely going to work the phones looking for those types of things. And again, I'm not reporting that that's happening. I'm just saying like that is the kind of thing that you look into. But like I said, Slayton's not a guy that I would be trading right now unless you're getting an offensive weapon back. I mean, he and Daniel Jones have chemistry. He's a good player. He's a good teammate. He's a guy people like having around, all that. So, Brian, blown away by that big super chat there. Appreciate that. Barbara says, big T-Mac, probably somebody that plays on the defensive side would be the target. Yeah, so corner, definitely linebacker, interior defensive line, all positions that could use reinforcing. I still think, running back looks with the injuries kind of scares me a little bit, but I guess they probably wouldn't invest there. You know, I mean, they did sign Jacob Johnson to be that fullback, but how do they feel about their tight ends even right now? After watching these last couple of games, Manhurts, Theo Johnson, Daniel Bellinger. I mean, it's hard not to find a position where they don't need to make an addition to improve the team. I don't mean that in a overly negative way, but I do think the priorities, if I had to prioritize it, I would say CB2, and I would say, if McFadden's injury is anything that's going to keep him out for some time too, especially, I think inside linebacker is a position that looks like a concern, especially because of how important it is to Bowen's defense. Big Jim says, is Bobby Skinner all bark and no bite? I have no idea. No idea. Mike says DJ will win comeback player of the year. There's a prediction from Mike. All right, let's see. Tommy says players like Alex Johnson, Rogers, Ovi, D. Johnson, Phillips, Owens. Can any of those players be impactful for future rotational roles? I think Deontay Johnson is. Are you talking about Drew Phillips, the slot corner? Drew Phillips, like he would be starting for this team, I think, if he were healthy. He's just banged up right now. He's got the ankle. Alex Johnson, I think, practice squad, develop. Same with Ovi. Don't know about Rogers. Javarius Owens, good question there. He's injured right now as well. Ray points out that Phil Simms sucked for a while too. Least 20-yard plays in the last 4 years. Yeah, bleak. Giants schedule is manageable. I see some wins out there with average offensive line play, says Barbara. Yeah, you see a handful. Over under 6.5 with Vegas. I think it's a fair over under. I think it should be more like 5.5, but maybe it moves there depending on how bad the injuries are going into week 1. I do think it could slide there quickly if they lose in week 1 to the Vikings. That's for sure. I think you can definitely talk your way into, hey, if the O-line is going to be good, you can talk yourself into hitting 7. If you feel like that's going to be the case. I feel like they look like an incomplete team, though. I think they're going to struggle to get any win necessarily. I had them winning 4 games early on. I haven't made my final prediction yet, but that was my initial one, and I still feel good about it. And like I said, as much as people here are tired of Jones, or a lot of people here are tired of Jones, if Daniel Jones goes down, they're in trouble. Like they do not have somebody who obviously profiles to win them games left and right at quarterback. OG says, on Daboll, did you see his face when he threw that interception? Daboll was ready to kill him. By the end of the season, Daboll will be 300 plus again because of Daniel Jones. Ray Ginsburg says, no game is easy for us right now, Barbara. That's true. Undefined says Jerry Reese was the beginning of the end, and Barbara says Mark Ross, his lieutenant, is still unemployed too. Tommy says if the trenches can be more physical and Daboll expect nothing less, these Giants can get back to Giants football. Never been an aired out team. I hate to see seasons wasted. Get back to smash mouth football. I like that. I hear that. Need a corner, please. Is Jason Sehorn available? That's funny. OG says, I was joking about Jerry Reese, but Joe Shane isn't looking good so far. He made the playoffs with Dave Gettleman's guys. Let's keep it real. Intel says this is not going to be a good season. Undefined. Oh, Shanks Bakery in the Northeast. All right. Good stuff. No doubt. Kevin says, does Jake Kubas make the team? You know, I asked Brian Daboll about him the other day directly. He said that Jake Kubas is a developmental guy, that, you know, a young guy who's still developing, but he said that he has the attitude and the approach to the game that they like at that position, which tells you they do like him. They want to keep him. I think he's a guy who makes the 53 because they don't want to risk losing him, sending him down to the practice squad. That's what I think. G-Men says, do you feel route running is a problem thus far? I will say that we're not guys open left and right against the Texans. That's for sure. I also think that the Texans are a good team. So take that for what it's worth. Tommy, for one, says it definitely should drop to 5 over under on wins, but Pat, keep it going. It's rough to stay motivated with such poor play. Hate to see the chat after. I got you. Yeah. Talking about your division rivals there. OG says, I'll take Joe Flacco over Daniel Jones. Tommy says Flacco just might make the team to a playoff, team to a playoff run for real though. Remember what he looked like with the Jets, right? You got to have the right coach, Joe Flacco. Barbara says, good night, Pat and Giants fans. Stay blue, baby. You too, Barbara. Ray says bringing in Drew Lock was a mistake if he can't take over. No doubt. They thought Tyrod was going to sign back here. How did they think that? I still don't understand that. OG says, thank you for reading my comments, Pat. You got it, OG. Thank you for always bringing it. Gary checks in, says, what's up, Pat? What move do you think Joe is going to make with the cap savings? I'm looking at the trade market, Gary. I think CB2. I think if Slayton got moved, maybe getting back an offensive weapon somehow. I'm not reporting this. I mentioned that the Niners are a team that supposedly is looking for a wide receiver back and maybe a 3-team deal if they make an Ayuk trade. So could he be factored in there? But I think obviously they need to upgrade. They're not in a position where they need to be getting rid of good players. Inside linebacker seems like a concern now, especially with Micah McFadden going down. We don't know how long he's out, but it could be out for longer than you would think. So we need to get an update on that and see where that stands. Interior defensive line also still a concern. So those are the ones I'm looking at. I also think running back, a lot of people in the chat here led by D-Kid think that they should be trying to go pay a quarterback somewhere too. All right. Tommy says, if the Giants had other coaching like the good coaches, do you think this roster wins more? I do think that, yes, I do think, like, listen, they downgraded at defensive coordinator. And then as far as the head coach and offense, yeah, it all has to be better. It hasn't been good enough. Ray says and yes, I do think they could win more games. Certainly there were 3 games last year they could have won that they lost because of game management decisions, the Bills, Jets, and Rams. Ray says after starting Cutlets ahead of Tyrod, told him bye-bye, no doubt. Ray believes the O-line is better, and Tommy reminds everyone, hit the like button. Health and wealth to all until next time. Yes, please, guys, before we finish up, if you haven't already, press the like button here live on Talking Ball Live with Pat Leonard. Thank you so much for being here, for all your participation and comments. D-Kit, thank you so much for all your support. Joe Winograd, Peter Randazzo. We also had Chris check in and Brian Boyle drop in with a big time super chat there at the end. Thank you, Brian. If you guys came in late, it'll be posted live. You can rewatch the whole Talking Ball Live. We talked about what their offensive identity is going to be, what it looks like based on the Houston game. Fun week coming up here. Jets Giants joint practice on Wednesday after Brandon Brown talks to us pre-practice on Tuesday at Giants. Sauce versus Neighbors should be fun. Maybe doing a bonus live pod on Wednesday night. We'll see how electric those joint practices go with the Jets. So I'll keep you updated whether it's going to be Wednesday and or Thursday or both. We'll see. Also having Ian O'Connor on the podcast to talk about his new great Aaron Rodgers book. Really excited about that conversation on Thursday. Probably should publish that on Friday. And then also remember, Talking Ball Live post-game after every Giants game. Next one up is Giants Jets this coming Saturday at MetLife Stadium from the press box there in MetLife. Looking forward to that. Let's see. Bombo says QB School on YouTube did a pretty good breakdown of the Giants passing game with Jones, wide receivers, and play calling. Worth checking out. And Tommy says Sauce is getting cooked by neighbors if Jones can get the ball out to him. D Kit says, thank you, Pat. OG says, good night, Pat. Holla. And Undefined says, good. Thanks, Pat. Thank you all. Going to tell you one more time about Boom Chaga and then get out of here. Boom Chaga Mushroom Super Drink, a natural extract loaded with anti-inflammatory, immune-boosting antioxidants and heart-healthy compounds. You can easily pour this natural liquid supplement into any of your favorite drinks. I put mine in my coffee every morning and immediately feel the difference. I personally have felt a post-workout Chaga also has the ability to lower cholesterol, reduce inflammation, and improve immune and heart health with its beta glucans and antioxidants. Go to boomchaga.com today to place your first order. And if you use the discount code TalkinBall25 or you access it through the QR code on your screen, you will get 25% off your first subscribe and save order. Right now, that means a month's supply costs you only $30. Start feeling the difference today at boomchaga.com. Guys, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for this Talking Ball Live. It was a lot of fun. Thanks for the support from all the super chatters. Take care and see you next time.